Part 1. Ashby froze momentarily as Newsom's words rang in his ears, the air still humming with tension. Then, almost without warning, he rose from behind his desk, adopting a calm expression he'd honed over years of double lives. Ashby. "You're right, Newsom. She was a distraction, and we don't need distractions." With those words, he lunged in one fluid motion, catching the assistant off guard. He slammed Newsom backward against the office door, using his forearm to crush the man's windpipe until his struggling ceased. The entire act took seconds, but felt like an eternity, both savage and strangely quiet in the confines of the dimly lit office. Ashby stood there, heart pounding as he surveyed the body. There was no turning back now. He had to move quickly. He remembered that most of the security cameras in the hallway and main entrances were positioned to watch players and visitors during daylight hours. Given the late hour, the building was empty and the campus mostly deserted. Even so, he needed a plan to bypass any potential footage or chance encounters. Ashby bolted the door from the inside. Anyone walking by would assume he was still working late or had simply stepped out, but at least it minimized the risk of someone barging in and discovering the scene. He knew there was a student event that evening in another part of the sports complex. Ashley texted one of his trusted graduate assistants, instructing them to handle any pressing matters and telling them he was in the zone with recruiting tapes, ensuring no one would come looking for him anytime soon. With adrenaline still surging, Ashby carefully wiped up any small signs of blood or scuff marks left from the struggle. He used sanitizing wipes from the trainer's kit he kept in a desk drawer, enough to remove immediate evidence from the floor and doorknob. In a back storage room by the locker area, there was a large wheeled equipment trunk used for away game uniforms and gear. Ashby retrieved it, making sure the corridor was empty before rolling it into his office. He slipped Newsom's lifeless form inside, contorting it to fit among old jerseys and practice cones. Newsom was of similar height to many players, so from a distance one might assume the trunk just carried more uniforms. Ashby knew the angles of the security cameras well. He had once helped plan the layout for maximum team safety. By wheeling the trunk along the wall and out a side entrance used for deliveries, he could avoid being caught on most camera feeds. To further reduce suspicion, he donned a university windbreaker and a baseball cap from one of the team giveaways, making himself look like a student manager hauling equipment. Under the cover of darkness, Ashley loaded the trunk into his SUV, using the vehicle's tinted windows to shield any passerby's view. He drove nearly 2 hours out of the city to a remote stretch of farmland he had scouted months earlier for a different purpose. There, behind a dilapidated barn, lay an old well no longer in use, its wooden cover rotted, and no sign of recent human activity. Carefully, Ashby dragged the trunk over to the well, pried open what was left of the cover, and one by one lifted out the weights he'd brought along from the gym storage. He secured them around Newsom's body with bungee cords scavenged from the equipment trunk. With a final heave, he slid Newsom into the darkness below. The splash echoed ominously, swallowed quickly by the still night. Ashby paused for a moment, feeling the rush of adrenaline fading into a cold numbness. He replaced the rotted well cover, scattered some debris to disguise the area, then sanitized the inside of the trunk with disinfectant wipes. Satisfied that no immediate traces remained, he loaded the trunk back into his SUV and drove away, his thoughts already turning to the next steps: how to account for Newsom's sudden departure, and how to maintain his impeccable facade at the university. By the time Ashby returned to campus, the clock had edged well past midnight. The parking lot was nearly empty, and the sports complex stood in quiet darkness. He planned to tell the team and staff that Newsom had left abruptly due to a serious family emergency, one so urgent that he hadn't even had time to say goodbye. In the high-stress world of college athletics, unexpected departures weren't unheard of, so most would likely accept the explanation. Before dawn, Ashby took the time to meticulously handle the traces of Newsom's personal life. He quietly visited Newsom's apartment, gathering his belongings and paying off the remainder of his lease so no red flags would arise about unpaid rent. He forwarded Newsom's mail to a temporary post office box and disposed of any personal effects that might raise questions. Every action was calculated to ensure no one could pinpoint exactly when or why Newsom had disappeared. Wiping away the last traces of sweat, Ashby allowed himself only the briefest moment of disorientation before pushing it down, just as he always did. He had removed one immediate threat, but created countless new questions in its wake. And as he slipped back into the role of Coach Ashley Ashby, face of Minnesota basketball, he knew the greatest test of his composure was yet to come. The season following Newsom's disappearance brought heightened curiosity from both media and fans, but Coach Ashley Ashby managed to deflect questions with a practiced smile and a few well-chosen words. It helped that he had a squad as compelling as any he'd ever assembled, a team that did more talking on the court than off it. While critics scoffed at the Gophers' lack of a proven superstar, Ashby believed he had all the right pieces for a historic Final Four run. At the heart of his plan were the Twin Towers, Aloysius Sow, the ultra-athletic center who reminded old-school fans of a young Shaquille O'Neal, and Patty Nixon, a 7'1" project-turned defensive anchor. On the perimeter, two contrasting guards perfectly complemented each other. Rowell, whose blistering speed left defenders gasping for air, and for love, a dead-eye shooter who could rattle off three-pointers almost on command. Their balanced inside-out attack was the envy of the Big Ten, even if few outside Minnesota truly understood what the Gophers were building. Midway through the season, Ashby solidified the program's future by signing two coveted four-star recruits. Mr. Basketball of North Dakota Stuart Moore, an explosive guard hailed for his court vision, and Jovan Sinville, a versatile power forward out of Apple Valley, California. Their signings underscored Ashby's commitment to winning now and later, ensuring that despite any off-court rumors, Minnesota remained a desirable destination for rising talent. The regular season ended with a strong 25-6 record, though the team stumbled in the second round of the Big Ten tournament. Critics once again questioned the Gophers' grit under pressure. But when NCAA Selection Sunday rolled around, the tournament committee rewarded Minnesota's overall body of work with a number 3 seed, enough to fan the flames of Ashby's ambitions. In the opening rounds of the Big Dance, the Gophers showed both poise and fire, dispatching Prairie View and Gonzaga before facing longtime rival Michigan State. Their methodical victory over the Spartans set up a sweet showdown with Cinderella darlings UAB, whose run ended as soon as they tried to penetrate the Gophers' suffocating front court. The victory put Minnesota back in the Final Four, pitting them against the high-octane offense of UNLV. Throughout it all, Coach Ashby remained composed and driven, roaming the sidelines with that same intense gaze he'd always worn. Behind the scenes, though, he was as guarded as ever, ensuring that no lingering whispers about Newsom's disappearance would overshadow the Gophers' remarkable resurgence. With the team now just 2 games away from the ultimate prize, Ashby's singular focus was on capitalizing on every advantage, confident that his squad had the talent, the drive, and the fearless spirit to carve its name into college basketball history. From the opening tip, you could sense the urgency in the air. Minnesota's lightning-fast guard Rowell wasted no time, launching a three-pointer just seconds into the game, igniting the crowd and giving the Golden Gophers an early spark. On the other end, UNLV answered with aggressive drives to the basket, setting a physical tone that would define the night. But Minnesota's strength inside quickly became apparent. Their towering center tandem of Aloysius Sow and Patty Nixon, fondly known as Pixon by the home crowd, thrilled the fans with a series of rim-rattling dunks, each one louder than the last. Meanwhile, sharpshooter For Love found his rhythm beyond the arc, draining several long-range bombs that kept UNLV's defense stretched thin. Even backup center Madeira got in on the action, surprising everyone with a spot-up 3 that seemed to rattle the Rebels' confidence. Despite the highlight plays, both teams refused to back down from the physicality, resulting in scrappy battles on the boards and a back-and-forth tug-of-war on the scoreboard. As the clock wound down, UNLV resorted to late-game fouling, hoping to put Minnesota on the line and chip away at the lead. But in a split-second decision, For Love shook off his defender and let a three-pointer fly, nailing it before the foul could occur. The dagger sealed the game's outcome. When the final buzzer sounded, the Golden Gophers emerged victorious, 78-71. It was a triumphant team effort, but Aloysius Sau stole the show with an MVP performance, 24 points, 10 rebounds, and 5 assists, proving once again why this Minnesota squad is a force to be reckoned with. Next up, a date with Oregon in the final. Tonight, the stage is set for a moment that will be etched into the history of college basketball. The NCAA Championship Final brings us Minnesota and Oregon, two teams that have fought their way through every challenge to earn their place in this ultimate showdown. For Minnesota, it's about resilience, a season built on determination and a belief that every play counts. On the other side, Oregon brings precision and composure. This is the NCAA Championship. The first half lived up to the hype, a back-and-forth battle of suffocating defense and timely offense that left Oregon leading by 4 at the break. As the teams huddled in their respective locker rooms, coach Ashley Ashby quietly reminded his players of the road they had traveled, the off-season uncertainties, the Final Four heartbreaks, and the determination that had brought them to this defining moment. With 9 minutes to go in the second half and trailing by a single point, Minnesota found a spark in Aloysius Sau, who muscled through Oregon's towering front line to put back a missed shot, igniting a 10-point run that the Gophers would never surrender. Despite a late surge from the Ducks, they could never close the gap, and when the final buzzer sounded, Minnesota stood atop the college basketball world, NCAA champions. Sau's dominant play in the paint earned him the tournament's MVP honors, adding another chapter to the Gophers' growing legacy as Center U. During the trophy presentation, a visibly emotional Ashby took the microphone to thank the university, the athletic director, his staff, and especially his players for believing in his vision. He paused to honor the memory of the AD's sister, acknowledging how much her absence still weighed on him. The dream he had pursued for so long was finally in his grasp, and though triumph coursed through his veins, there remained an undercurrent of grief and secrets yet to be put to rest. Later that night, Coach Ashby slipped into the city to celebrate in the only way he truly knew how, a restless, private ritual of satisfaction mingled with shadows. A champion now in every sense, Ashley Ashby walked the line between glory and darkness, with a newly minted title to his name and a storm of unspoken truths still following close behind. The end.